We begin today the Gemara on Daf Lamed Tes Amud Aleph at the Mishnah. Sagt the Heilige Mishnah, Shor shel Pikeach, Shenogach Shor shel Cheresh Shoyte v'Kotten. A shor of a normal sane person gored the shor of a Cheresh Shoyte Kotten. So Cheresh, in the lashon of the Mishnah in Chazal B'chlal, is a person that's deaf-mute and his mind doesn't develop properly. Or a Shoyte, a mentally deranged person, or a Kotten on the Bar Mitzvah. So you chayiv for the damage that you caused. On the other hand, but the axe of a cheresh or shayt or cotton that gores the axe of a normal person, so then potter. They're potter for this damage. Because a cheresh shayt of a cotton are not a ish, they're not, it says in the pasuk, so they're not on the level of a ish where they have the awareness to be responsible, so they'll be potter. Then says the Mishnah, when you have a shayr of this cheresh shoyte v'kotten that gores, mamidin lehen apitropis, we appoint an apitropis, which is a shliach of a bezdin, a caretaker, to take care of this shayr. Umeidin lehen, that is, and we testify b'fnei apitropis. In front of this apitropis, we testify if it gored once, twice, 3 times. So someone comes and testifies in front of this apitropis, and after 3 times, the shor becomes a shor muad. Now, it seems like from this Mishnah that by a shor of a cheresh shoyte v'kotten, you will be responsible to pay for the damage that it causes, even by a tam, because there's an apotropos, a caretaker that takes care of this. But the beginning of the Mishnah said that by a cheresh shoyte v'kotten, if it gores, you're going to be potter. So the Gemara will right away address this. So the Gemara writes, you have this apotropos that's taking care of the shayr of the cheresh shoyte v'kotten, but now if nespakach a cheresh, this cheresh got healed, and therefore he's now like a regular healthy person. Nishtafa shoyte, or this mentally deranged person also, he was healed, and now he can take responsibility. Or v'higdala kotten, after this kotten becomes a gadol, becomes bar mitzvah. So now what happens is this shayr that was under the care and the basically sort of the ownership of the apotropos, it leaves now the apotropos' possession. And it goes back to the possession of this individual, whether the cheresh or the shayte or the cotton that now are able to take care of it. So chazal tamusay, the status of the shayr goes back to its original status of being a tam, even if it was already a muad, because the apotropos was worn 3 times. It goes now back to the status of being a tam. Divrei Rav Meir, this is Rav Meir's opinion. Rashi says, and we'll see this in the Gemara, this is based on the concept that Rishus Meshana, that if there's a change of ownership of a shayr, even though it was a muad, once it goes into a different person's possession, it loses that status of a muad, it goes back and it becomes a tam. So over here, it goes from the apotropos back to the possession of this cheresh shoyte v'kotten that's now healthy, it becomes back a tam. Rabbi Yossi says that no, the status of a muad that it had before remains, even though it's changing now ownership, doesn't matter. Once it's a muad, it's a muad. Another din, shayr ha'etztadin, a shayr that's used in a stadium or in this match where they have these oxen that are fighting with one another, and they're trained for this, to fight with one another with their horns. And while it was fighting, it gored someone and it damaged another ox. Ein chayiv misa. So an ox that gores and kills someone, so usually this is what's called a shayr aniskal. You have to put this shayr to death. But over here, if it happened in this kind of place where it was trained to do this, it's not chayiv misa. Shenema ki yigach. The shayr that gores and kills is only chayiv misa if it gores, v'lo sheyagichuhu. But not in a situation where people instigated and trained this shayr to go and gore, and then it was wild and it ended up killing someone. So the shayr is not chayiv misa in such a case. Zok the Gemara, hagufa kashya. You look here in the Mishnah, the first 2 halachas of the Mishnah seem to contradict each other. Because Amre, at first you say, shayr shel cheresh shoyte v'kotten shenogach shayr shel pikeach, the shayr of a cheresh shoyte v'kotten that gores the shayr of pikeach, potter. You potter for that. So when it says potter alme, that seemingly what it's saying is, not only the cheresh shoyte v'kotten themselves are potter, as I mentioned, because it says in the Torah ish, and they're not in the status of a ish, but we see from this also that ein mamidin apotropos, letam ligmois migufay. We don't appoint for a cheresh shoyte v'kotten an apotropos to collect for the payment of a tam. When it's a tam, and what's the halacha of a tam? You collect the payment from the body of the animal itself that gored and damaged. So I don't appoint an apotropos to collect the payment from the tam itself. That's what this Mishnah is talking about. Right? So In other words, so the chiddush over here is, as Rashi explained in the Mishnah actually, that when it comes to collecting from Yisaimim, so you don't collect from the body of the shoyer itself, and the reason for that is because you can't collect from Yisaimim from metaltalin. You could only collect from Yisaimim any payment from karka. But to collect from Yisaimim from any movable item, the halacha is you don't collect from Yisaimim from movable items. So since the payment of a tam comes from the shoyer itself that gored and damaged, and that's metaltalin, it's a movable item, so therefore you don't collect from metaltalin. That's Rashi's explanation of why the Reisha of the Mishnah is saying that you don't collect from an apotropis, even when you don't appoint an apotropis, that is, to collect from the shoyer tam from its body, because it's only metaltalin. Taisvus actually has a different shot. Big discussion here in Taisvus. He disagrees with Rashi about this. Taisvus says that this is one of the kulas by a tam, just like we see the Torah said that you only pay by a tam chatzi nezek, and you collect it from the body of the animal itself. You can't collect it from anywhere else. This is another kula that you can't collect it in the case where there's a yasim, or in a case where it's a chereshet v'katan and he can't take care of it himself, and there's an apotropis. You don't collect from the tam, which is migufay. That's what the Reisha of the Mishnah is saying. But then, what does the Seif of the Mishnah say? That for Chereshet you do appoint an apotropis to take care of it. And the Mishnah said, and then you say testimony about this shar that's wild and that's goring. So you say Eidos in front of this apotropis, alme, apotropis, latam, ligbais megufay. So seemingly what the Mishnah is saying is that you do appoint an apotropis, and you could collect from this shar tam. The payment comes from the guf of the animal that's gored and damaged, but you do appoint an apotropis to collect this payment. And that includes even from Yisaimim, even though usually we don't collect from Yisaimim. According to Rashi's Pshat, the point is usually you don't collect from Yisaimim from a Taltlin. But here, this part of the Mishnah is saying that you do appoint an apotropis, and you will collect even from a Shar Tam. So Rav answers, Hachi Katani. This is the way you have to understand the Mishnah. When it says you appoint an apotropis, what it means to say is, Vim Hochsaku Nakchonim. If the Bezdin sees that this share that belongs to these people, Achere, Shaita, or Cotton, and they don't pay for a short time that's goring, but they see that this animal is wild. Someone has to take care of this. So then, Mamidel and Apotropis, Bezdin will appoint a caretaker, and then once you have an apotropis, now we can say testimony about this animal that's goring and it's causing damage in front of the apotropis. You're going to say testimony once, a second time, a third time, and then and now the animal will become a mu'id. And only now, after it will gore a fourth time, once it was established to be a mu'id, because this apotropis was warned about it, then l'shalom aliyah. Then you're going to have to pay full damage, and you pay not only from the body of the animal that gored, but you pay from aliyah, you pay from the best of the properties for this damage. So there's no stira here. The beginning of the Mishnah is saying that you don't collect from the chereshet of the katan, even if you appoint an apotropis when it's a tam, to pay from the body of the animal itself. But the Seif is saying, but if Bezin sees that this animal is wild, they appoint an apotropis, and you warn the apotropis, and once it's a mu'id, and you pay nezek shalim and aliyah, then the apotropis has to pay. The Gemara actually says here there's a machlokes who's the one that pays. So you have to pay ma'aliyah from the best of properties. That's where you collect the payment from. But ma'aliyah sman, from whose best properties do you collect this payment? Rabbi Yechanan says ma'aliyah yisaimim. You take from the best properties of the yisaimim themselves. If they have properties that they inherited, that's where you take the collection of the payment. Rabbi Yesi b'chanina amar ma'aliyah apotropis. You take it from the best properties of the apotropis. They are the caretakers. They have the responsibility. They're like a shemer. They are the ones that have to guard this animal. And if the animal went and gored after they were warned, so they were negligent and didn't guard the animal property, so you'd collect the payment for the Shered Amuad now from the properties of the apotropis, not from the Yisayim. So the Gemara asks, so me, Omer Rabbi Yechanan Chachi. Is it possible to say that Rabbi Yechanan said that you collect the payment from the best properties of the Yisayim themselves? But Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav Asi as follows: Ein is kokin lenichse Yisayim. We never collect any kinds of payments from Yisayim that are ketanim. We're talking about here Yisayim that are not bar mitzvah yet. Ella and Kain ribis echeles ben. Unless it's a situation where they owe someone money, and every day that passes, there's interest that they are going to have to pay because of this. So to collect from the Yisayim is for their benefit, to save them this interest that they would have to pay. But if it's not something that's saving the Yisaimim money, you don't collect any payment from Yisaimim. But Rabbi Yochanan says that there's another exception. Oi lishtar sheyesh by ribis. If there's a shtar of ribis, that's what we just said basically. But then another case, oi liksubes isha mishum mezayni. Or if there is a wife that the halacha by a wife is that when the husband passes away, she collects money for the ksubeh. But until she collects that money of the ksubeh, she has to get fed from the properties of this Yerusha. After she gets her ksubah, she doesn't get mezainis anymore. She doesn't get any food because she has now her money of her ksubah. So over here, it's a favor for the Yisaimim to pay off this ksubah right away, so she shouldn't be collecting the money of the mezainis all this time. So that's another exception that Rabbi Yochanan said. But we clearly see here that Rabbi Yochanan holds, like Rabasi, and that you don't collect from Yisaimim Ketanim any payment besides these exceptions. So why are we saying over here that when this share of the Yisaimim that was under the care of this apotropos is gored and damaged, you collect the payment from the properties of the Yisaimim themselves? Taisus over here points out what's the reason why you don't collect from Yisaimim Ketanim. Usually the Gemara says the reason is because we're afraid that if there's something that the father owed money and these Yisaimim are Ketanim, they have no way to fight and argue for themselves. Maybe the father set aside tzrari, which means a bundle of money or a bundle of valuables that he already gave that person that's coming to collect the loan or whatever it is that he's coming to collect. And the Yisaimim Ketanim can't prove it, they can't show it, so therefore we can't collect. We wait until they're Gedolim and they'll be able to show that maybe our father paid you already. But Taisu says over here in this case you can't say that pshat because over here the goring of this ox happened after the father passed away. So Taisu says over here the reason is because as a klal you never collect money from any Baal Din unless it's befonov, it's in front of him. You can come and bring Eidim to testify that he owes this money. Ketanim are like they're not present. To bring Eidos that they're share gored and therefore to collect money from their properties, it's like they're not present because Ketanim have no das b'chlal. So you can't collect from them for the share that gored and damaged. So how could Rabbi Yochanan here say that you do collect for this hezek that happened here? Answers the Gemara, Eipach. So you have to switch over here the opinions that we mentioned before. Rabbi Yochanan is the one that said Ma'aliyas apotropsin, that we only collect from the best properties of the caretaker. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, it's Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina that said Ma'aliyas Yisaimim, that you collect from the properties of the Yisaimim themselves. But the Gemara doesn't accept this answer. So Rav says, Mishom, the Kashir, the Rabbi Yochanan, because we had a contradiction in what Rabbi Yochanan said about this. So Mashvasle, Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina Taya. So you switched the opinions, and now you said that Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina is the one that says that you collect from Yisaimim. So, but we know that that's not true. Nobody holds that you collect from Yisaimim. In such a case, when the share gores and you can't say Eidus in front of these Yisaimim. So Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina is now the one that says this, and he's the one that's saying halacha that's not true. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina was also a dayan, and he knows the halacha, and he goes to the depth of the halacha, and he definitely paskined correctly. So how could you say that Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina is the one that says that you collect from Yisaimim? Ella, so therefore the Gemara goes back and says the version we said before is true. Loilam loy teipach. We're not going to switch the opinions here. But umazik shani, even though Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yochanan that it is, before Rabasi, they said we never collect from Yisaimim, but if Yisaimim have a share that's under the care of an apotropos and it went and gored and damaged, a mazik is different. Over here, Chachamim were misakin that you should collect payment for this. If not, the share will go out and gore and damage. So you do collect the payment for the teva of the tzibur, that the people should get paid for the damages that was caused. This is another exception that you do collect even from Yisaimim Ketanim. Usually by a loan, by any other kind of money that's owed, you don't collect anything from Yisaimim Ketanim. A pekadon, a loan, whatever it is. But hezek, that chacham will misaken that you do collect. Now the Gemara explains, so what's the basis of the machlokes, whether the payment comes from the Yisaimim Ketanim themselves, their properties, or the properties of the apotropos? So Rabbi Yochanan says that the collection of the payment comes from the aliyah, from the best properties of the Yisaimim. The Amrit Maliyas apotropos, if you're going to say that the payment comes from the properties of the apotropos, so then mimni v'lo yavdi. People are not going to want to take on this position to be an apotropos. They'll say, we're going to have this new responsibility, and then if it causes damage, we're going to have to pay. They're not going to want to do this. Now, the chiddush of the Gemara over here is, Taisa speaks about this barichas, even though we're talking here about a case where the shaymer, which is the apotropos, he's basically a shaymer, he was negligent, and he caused this damage. So it's his pshia. If it wasn't his pshia, he's not going to be chayev. But even though he didn't guard it properly, and it caused the damage. So l'chayre, what kind of a tainus could the apotropos have? You didn't guard it properly, so therefore you should pay. But nevertheless, Rabbi Yochanan says Chachamim was still misakin that the apotropos should not have to pay, because if you're going to put this extra responsibility and make him pay, so people are going to say, why do I need this headache? I don't want to be this apotropos. But Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina says, Ma'aliyas apotropos. We do collect from the best properties of the apotropos, because after all, he's the one that didn't guard it properly. But then what we do is v'chayzerin v'nifraim and hayisaimim l'chigodli. Once the yisaimim become gedolim, now we go back to the properties of the yisaimim and we pay back the apotropos for this damage from what was collected from them. Again, because otherwise the apotropos will not want to take on such a job, knowing that he's going to lose out. He could lose out if he's not going to guard properly.
This apotropos gets paid.
He gets reimbursed. Oh, if an apotropos gets paid for the job that he does, so right? Yeah, if he's a shemis sacha, could be they do. This is a shliach of a bezin that takes on this job. Yeah, mulchayri does get paid for the job, but still, it's still something that people won't want to do because the loss, the payment, the damage over here might be much more than whatever payment he gets for this, and people wouldn't want to do this if we're not going to reimburse, at least reimburse. Okay, now the premise of everything that the Gemara said until here was that what the Mishnah is saying is that even when you appoint an apotropos, you only pay for a shar mu'id when you pay mino aliyah. But to collect from the guf of the animal that Gordon damaged by a shar tam, that you don't collect. But the Gemara here brings that this is actually a machlekes. Mamid and lan apotropos this, that we appoint an apotropos or apotropin. Latam, when it's a shar which is still a tam, lig bois megufai, to collect the payment from the body of the animal that gored itself. So before we said we don't, says the Gemara Tanoi. It's actually machlekes Tanoim. The Tanya in a Braisa we learned as follows: Shor shenischarshu bailov, an ox, its owner became a deaf mute, or shenishtatu bailov, or the owner lost his mind, or v'shalchul bailov lemedina sayam, the owner went overseas and he left his ox over here itself. So Yehuda ben Akusa says that Alma Sumches, that is, he said in the name of Sumches, Hareyu b'tamusai. So this shor remains in its status of being a tam, until the owner comes back or the owner gains his awareness back, and you can say edus about this shor that's goring in front of the owner. So the simple pshat of the Braisa would sound like it's saying that if the owner is not present, whether mentally or physically, the animal always remains a tam, because you can't warn him. He's not here to warn him, so its status will never change. The Gemara will soon prove, though, that the pshat is different. Okay, the Chachamim say, if this person is not here, whether mentally or physically, so we appoint a caretaker, and then we say the testimony about the shor that's goring in front of this apotropos, and it could become a shor mu'id after it gored 3 times. Now the Braisa continues, this deaf mute became healed, this shaita became healed, a cotton became a gadol, or the owner that left came back. So now it was already warned, and it became already a mu'id through the apotropos that was warned. So Yehuda ben Akusa Oma Sumches, Yehuda ben Akusa said in the name of Sumches, now that the owner comes back and he takes possession back over his ox, Chazal Tamusai, it goes back to its original status of being a tam, until you'll have to warn again this owner 3 times that it should become again a mu'id. Rabbi Yosi says, no, Hareyu b'cheskasai. Even though the owner comes back and now the ownership of this shor changes from the apotropos back to the original owner, it doesn't. The status of it that it already became a mu'id remains. It doesn't go back to being a tam. Okay, this is the Braisa. No. Yeah, it has to go on nut again another 3 times in order for it to become a shor mu'id again. Okay, till there's a lashon to Braisa. So now says the Gemara, Omru, it was said about this Braisa, going back to the beginning of the Braisa, Mai harehu b'tamusai de ka'oma sumches. When Sumches said in the beginning that if the owner left town or he lost his mind, it remains in the status of a tam. What did Sumches mean to say by that? If you're going to say like it sounds simply, that means that since the owner is not here, it cannot become a mu'id at all, but that can't be the pshat. Because Hamidiktani Seife, in the Seife where it says that you appoint an apotropis and it becomes a mu'id, and then over there Sumchis himself is speaking, and Sumchis himself says, Chazal l'tamusai, that even though it became a mu'id, when the owner comes back, because it's going back to his possession, it reverts back to its original status of being a tam. B'klal yayit. So I see that even when the owner is not here and you appoint an apotropis, even Sumchis agrees that it could become a mu'id. So what did he mean in the beginning when he said Harehu b'tamusai, that it remains a tam? So therefore the Gemara says a nubshat. Elo ma yarehu b'tamusai. What did he mean to say that it's b'tamusai? Harehu bitmi musai. That now, while you appoint an apotropis, as long as it's still a shor tam, it remains whole. What does it mean? It remains whole. The loy mechasrinan lei, that we're not going to cause any lack because of a payment. Meaning that while it's still a tam, you don't have to pay chatzi nezek because the collection of the payment comes from the body of the animal itself that gored and damaged. So what we see from here is, what's Sumcha saying? Alme eim amiden apotropis letam ligbais migufay. You don't appoint an apotropis and then collect a payment for the damage that it caused as a tam, because the payment comes from the body of the animal itself. That's what Sumchas meant to say when he said that b'tamusa. B'tamusa means that the animal remains whole. We're not going to collect the chatzi nezek from the body of the animal. Right? So Sumchas agrees that once it becomes a mu'id, so then you will collect the payment for nezek shalim, but not while it's still a tam. Then the Chachamim say mamidan lan apotropis umeidin lahem b'fnei apotropis. You appoint an apotropis, and then you can testify about this animal that's goring in front of the apotropis. What are the Chachamim arguing? Alme, what we see here is Chachamim are saying mamidin apotropis latam. You appoint an apotropis even for this animal that's still a tam. Ligbais migufay, and you collect the payment even from the body of the animal when it's in the possession of the apotropis. So here we see in this brayse that it's a machlokes of Sumchis and the Chachamim, whether you collect the payment when this animal is in the possession of the apotropis while it's still a tam, collect from its body. That's the explanation of the first machlokes in the brayse. Now the seife b'mai kamiflagi, the seife of this brayse, what is the basis of the argument? In the seife of the brayse, where it says they argue when the original owner comes back, does the animal now that goes back to the original owner's possession, if it was already established as a mu'id, does it become a tam back again? What are they arguing about? Says the Gemara, Rishus Mishane Ikebenayu. When you change the possession of ownership, does it change also the status of this animal of being a mu'id and goes not to a new owner? Does it become back a tam? That's the machlokes. Sumcha savar Rishus Mishane. Sumcha says that because it's going from the possession of the apotropis back to the original ownership of the person, it becomes a tam again. Rav Yesi Sava, Rav Yesi's Rishus Ein Mishana. That the fact that you change the ownership, that doesn't change, it remains a mu'id as it was before. This inyan of Rishus Mishana the Gemara brings there, the Rebbe speaks about this Barichus and a Sicha and Chelik Lamed Vav, Parshas Mishpatim. And there the Rebbe brings that there's a Machlekes Rishayim, what the basis of this concept is. Because it's changing ownership, so it becomes a tam again. Why should it change the status of the animal just because it changed ownership? We see the animal is wild and it's goring. So the Rebbe says two pshatim. According to Rashi in the Mishnah before, you see Rashi holds the reason is because you only become a mu'id by the owner that was warned about this. That's a chelik of the din of a mu'id. So if you're changing ownership and now there's a new owner, so he wasn't warned 3 times about this, even though the animal was wild, but the new owner has to be warned 3 times, new times when it's goring in order for it to become a mu'id. That's Rashi's pshat. The Rambam's pshat though is, or we see the Meiri says this, and you see it also from the Rambam, that when the animal changes ownership, it's the teva of the shayr itself that it changes its behavior. It sees that there's a different owner that treats it differently, similar to what we had before, if you remember, the behavior of an animal on Shabbos on a weekday. It sees a different clothing and a different behavior. So if it's a different owner, different behavior, so the animal changes its nature. So therefore, the fact that it was a mu'ad before is now it becomes back a tam. Those are the 2 pshatim. Then over there, Ibn Aveda, the Rebbe explains there, very geschmack, that this concept of Rishus Mishana means usually when a person has a Nefesh Bahamis, which becomes a Shar Mu'ad that's very wild, how do you have the koyach to change the Rishus of the Nefesh Bahamis or the koyach of the Nefesh Bahamis that's out of control? Little by little, you have to, the Gemara said before, if it becomes a tam, Sorry, that if it was a muad, that is, and you want to revert it back to a tam, so just like you have to establish that it gored 3 times in order for it to become a muad, you also have to see that it sees 3 shvarim 3 times, and it slowly you can establish it back to become again a muad. Again, a tam, that is, to go back to the status of a tam. That's usually. But over here, though, what the Gemara is saying is, Rishus Meshana. If a person puts himself in a different Rishus, which means with the Asay Toiv, a person puts himself in a place of Kedusha, and you just put yourself in a new Rishus, automatically the Nefesh Bahamas loses its power. You become so absorbed in the Kedusha of Teireh that you shine the light of Kedusha of Teireh that automatically it changes and it reverts back to the status of a tam without the usual process. And there's different dargis in that Rebbe explains over there in the Sikha based on this Indian here in the Gemara. Sagt the Gemara, Tan Rabbanon, we learned in the Braise about this halacha of the shoyer of a chere shoyte v'katan. Shoyer chere shoyte v'katan shenogach, the shoyer of a chere shoyte or katan that gored. Rabbi Yaakov mishalem. Rabbi Yaakov pays. That's the literal translation of these words. Chatzi nezek. Oh, so Rabbi Yaakov says you pay chatzi nezek. So he didn't just say pays. He says you pay, and he pointed out specifically you pay chatzi nezek. So first, the Gemara just spells out the simple meaning of how you read these words. Rabbi Yaakov, maya videte. How do you read this brayse? Rabbi Yaakov pays. What did Rabbi Yaakov do wrong? Why is it saying Rabbi Yaakov pays? Elo, Eimer, the way to read the brayse is Rabbi Yaakov, Eimer. Rabbi Yaakov says, Rabbi Yaakov's opinion is that Mishalim chatzi nezek. That the shoyer of a chere shoyte v'katan that gores and damages, so you pay chatzi nezek. Okay, so the Gemara now will try to figure out what exactly was Rabbi Yaakov saying. What's bothering the Gemara over here is, why does Rabbi Yaakov have to point out that you pay chatzi nezek? Why can't he simply say that you pay? And according to the way the Gemara understands now, if Rabbi Yaakov would simply say that by the shoyer of a chere shoyte v'katan you pay, well, even without spelling out chatzi nezek, we would understand that this includes both. That you pay when it's a tam, you pay chatzi nezek, and that's if you appointed an apotropis. Without an apotropis, a chere shoyte v'katan would not pay. Or if it becomes a muad, you pay nezek shalim. So why does he have to point out this detail of chatzi nezek? Says the Gemara, b'maya skinon. What are we talking about over here? He betam. If this animal here is a tam, so then pshita. So then it should be obvious that, like a tam always pays chatzi nezek. So here you appointed an apotropis for this chere shoyte v'katan, and you pay chatzi nezek. The kul almanavi chatzi nezek u'de mishalem. Any shoyer that gores and damages always pays chatzi nezek. So over here as well, you should pay the same chatzi nezek. Again? It has to be an apotropis, because otherwise a chere shoyte v'katan, the Mishnah said a shoyer of a chere shoyte v'katan is potter. It has to be talking about with an apotropis. But still, the Gemara says that if we would just say mishalim, even without chatzi nezek, I would automatically understand that you pay chatzi nezek. Taisus over here discusses, even though l'chayra there is a chiddush over here to say that with an apotropis you pay chatzi nezek, because the Gemara before said that there's a machlekes about this. According to one opinion, because the payment comes migufoi, so even if there is an apotropis, you still don't collect the payment. So maybe that's what the chiddush of Rabbi Yaakov was. The Gemara actually is later going to suggest this. But at this point, the Gemara holds, even if it would just say mishalim, that you pay, it would be understood that you pay whatever you have to pay. If it's a tam, you pay chatzi nezek. If it's a muad, you pay nezek shalim. Like I said, it has to be with an apotropis here. Otherwise, there's no payment at all. So the Gemara's question is, why is it saying chatzi nezek? Everybody pays chatzi nezek if it's a tam. If the case of here is that this animal is already a mu'ed, so why are you paying only chatzi nezek? If he guarded this animal properly and it still went and gored and damaged, so klala, you shouldn't have to pay anything. This apotropis guarded it properly, so it was an einus. So klala, loy boy l'shlumi, that is, you shouldn't pay anything. And if you didn't guard it properly, so then this apotropis should have to pay full pay if it's already a mu'ed. Why only chatzi nezek? Okay, so the Gemara now explains that when it says here that this apotropis that's taking care of this animal of the chere shoyte v'katan and you pay chatzi nezek, it's talking about a specific halacha. Rave says loylam b'mu'ed. We're talking about an animal which is already a mu'ed. And here the Gemara is going to explain this based on 3 different details. But before I read it inside, the first thing that it's going to be based on is halacha that's we have here later in the Masechta a few times. I think we brought it up already once before. There's a difference in the requirement of shmireh for a shor tam and then a shor mu'ed. By a shor mu'ed, you only have to have a shmireh pchusa, A basic shmira. What's considered to be a basic shmira? If you're keeping your animals in a barn and you lock the door and the door is closed well enough that if a regular wind would come, it wouldn't swing the door open. That's called a regular basic shmira, shmira pchusa. And you'll be put there to pay the full payment of a muad. By a tam though, the chatzin nezek that you have to pay, over there the Torah is more machmer. The Torah says unless you do a shmira mu'ula, which means that you close the door of the barn so well that even if a big wind comes, a hurricane comes, still it's not going to open up the door, so then you're going to be potter. But if it wasn't a shmira mu'ula, so then you're still going to have to pay the chatzin nezek. So there's two different levels of guarding the animal. Okay, so the Gemara now explains as follows. Here we're talking about an animal that's in the care of the apotropis, and it's already a muad. What are we talking about over here? The of the shmira pechusa, that this apotropis did the basic shmira that works to pati you of the full payment of a muad, but he didn't do the better shmira, the full shmira that patis you of the half a payment of the tam. Now, Rab Yaakov Savala Rab Yehuda. And another detail to explain what the payment of chatzin nezek over here is. So Rab Yaakov holds like Rab Yehuda. What's Rab Yehuda's opinion? The Omar Rab Yehuda says tzad tamus b'mekayma oimedes. Rab Yehuda says even after a shir tam becomes a muad and now you pay a full payment, so that full payment is actually made up of two parts. The first half of payment you're paying just like a tam. And we're just adding another half to pay the full payment, which is the payment of the muad. But the first half is still the payment of the tam. So therefore, for the first half of the payment, the halachas of a tam will still apply. And a third detail here is V'savala Rab Yehuda. And Rab Yaakov holds like Rab Yehuda, the Omar that said another halacha, and this is the halacha I just mentioned before, the Omar, muad sagile b'shmire pechusa. For a muad, it's enough if you do a basic shmira, and for the tam though, you have to do a much better shmira. For the tam, you have to do a shmira mola. Rashi brings it's learned out from psukim. We'll see later. It's learned out from extra psukim. Dafke by a tam, the Torah says if you want to be potter to pay even from the chatzin nezek, you have to do the best shmira. To be potter of the full payment of a muad, for that the basic shmira is good enough. But to be potter from a tam, you have to do the full shmira. Okay, now a third detail over here is v'savala k'rabbanon, and Rab Yaakov holds like the Rabbanon, the Omri, that say mamidin apotropis letam ligbais migufay, that we appoint an apotropis and you collect from the apotropis even the damage that by a tam that's collected from the body of the animal itself, you still collect that payment from the body of the animal itself. So what's the point of the Gemara saying over here? What did Rabbi Yaakov mean to say when he says that this shoyr of the cheres shoyt of the cotton that damaged while it was a tam, and not while it was a tam, it was already a muad, that is. It was already a muad, but you still pay chatzin nezek. Why are you paying chatzin nezek if it was already a muad? The answer is you're paying chatzin nezek because the nezek that you have to pay, the full nezek that you have to pay for a muad, you don't pay. Because he did a shmira pechusa. He did the basic shmira. If you do the basic shmira, you don't pay full payment of a muad. But he didn't do the shmira mu'ula, so you still pay the payment of a tam. Because he holds like Rabbi Yehuda that says that halacha, the original status of the halacha of the payment for a tam, the mekayma medes, that remains. So that original payment of the chatzin nezek, you still have to pay. And even though we're talking about an apotropis, but nevertheless, Rabbi Yaakov holds like the opinion that says, like the Rabbanan we quoted before, that even an apotropis does pay from the chatzin nezek of the guf of the animal. So therefore over here, this is the chatzin nezek that you pay even while it was a muad. Why? Because there was a shmira pechusa, and you're paying the chatzin nezek from the guf of the animal. That's the original halacha of tam that remains. That's Rav's pshat and what Rabbi Yaakov was saying. That's why he said that was his chiddush when he said the words chatzin nezek. Amalei Abaye, so Abaye says to Rav's pshat. So does that mean v'loy pligi? That Rabbi Yaakov, you're basing what Rabbi Yaakov said on Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, right? Regarding Rabbi Yehuda said that the tzad tamos is b'mekayma medes. That's one detail that Rabbi Yehuda holds, and another detail that Rabbi Yehuda holds that for a muad shmira pchusa is good enough. Only for a tam you need shmira mola. So you're basing Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. So there's no argument between them. But Rabbi Abaye brings a second brisa where there we see that there's an argument between Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yehuda, and they don't agree about this. But Vatanya, in a brisa we learned, that's under the care of an apotropos, that gores, Rabbi Yehuda mechayev. Rabbi Yehuda says that you chayev. And Rabbi Yaakov chatzi nezek. Rabbi Yaakov says you only pay chatzi nezek. Or Rabbi Yaakov chatzi nezek u'de mishalem. You only pay chatzi nezek. So here you see that there's an argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yaakov about this. How could you say that the opinion of Rabbi Yaakov is based on the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that even after it's a mu'id, sometimes you'll only pay chatzi nezek, and that is if you did the basic shmirah, you didn't do the full shmirah, and therefore the original payment of tam you still have to pay. Over here we see clearly it's a machlekes. So Rabbi Barula answers and says that no, even in this brayse here, it's not a machlekes, because Ma'ash mechayev Rabbi Yehuda, when it says in the brayse that Rabbi Yehuda said yechayev, Pirish Rabbi Yaakov. Rabbi Yaakov comes and just explains Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Yes, you chayiv, but you only chayiv chatzi nezek because it was only a shmirah pechusa, and therefore you potter for the full payment of the mu'id, but you still chayiv for the payment of the tam. So there's no argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yaakov. The pshat that Rav said before remains. But now the Gemara explains Abaye's pshat. Well, Abaye dama pligi, Abaye that says that there is a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yaakov. So b'may pligi. How does he explain this machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yaakov, whether in this case you pay nezek shalim b'chatzi nezek? Amalach will answer you and say as follows: Hacha b'may askinon. What is this machlokes talking about? B'mu'id, it's an animal. It's already a mu'id. V'loy notre klal. After this apotropos was already worn 3 times, the animal is a mu'id, and now he didn't guard this animal at all. Not like the pshat we said before that he guarded it a basic shmir. He didn't guard the animal at all. So what's the machlekes here? Rabbi Yaakov savalak Rabbi Yehuda b'chadeh. Rabbi Yaakov that says that you only pay chatzi nezek, even though he didn't guard the animal at all. He agrees to Rabbi Yehuda in one of the details of what he holds. U'palagalei b'chadeh. And he argues on Rabbi Yehuda in another detail, and it's going to end up that you only pay chatzi nezek. And the Gemara explains why that is. So Rabbi Yehuda b'chada, he holds the Rabbi Yehuda in one detail. The ilu Rabbi Yehuda is savar, as we see. What did Rabbi Yehuda say? Tzad tamus b'mekayma oimedes. That aspect of the payment, the first half of the payment, which is a tam, that remains even after the animal becomes a mu'id, and you're paying the full payment. The first half of the payment has the halacha of a tam. So that half of the payment is b'mekayma oimedes. But then, on the other hand, he argues on Rabbi Yehuda with another detail. And what's that? Rabbi Yehuda Sava, Rabbi Yehuda said, Mamidin lehem apotropis letam ligbais migufay. Rabbi Yehuda holds that you appoint an apotropis, and with an apotropis you can collect even the payment that comes from the guf of the animal itself. But Rabbi Yaakov Savar, on this detail, Rabbi Yaakov argues and says, Ei mamidin, you don't appoint an apotropis to collect chatzi nezek from a tam. V'lei mishalem, and therefore over here it would come out v'lei mishalem ala palga demuit. So you only pay chatzi nezek, which half? Not the half that it's still a tam. That half that it's still a tam, you don't collect from apotropis. You only collect a half, which is the payment of a mu'id. So therefore Rabbi Yehuda says that you pay chatzi nezek. Not Rabbi Yehuda, sorry, that's Rabbi Yaakov. Rabbi Yaakov says that you pay chatzi nezek. Again, so what the Gemara is saying over here is there's 2 halachas of Rabbi Yehuda. One halacha is that every mu'id is a half a tam. Another halacha Rabbi Yehuda said is that you appoint an apotropis to collect even the tam payment as well. Rabbi Yaakov argues on one of these points. Rabbi Yaakov says, yeah, it's a half a tam and it's a half a mu'id. The half a payment which is a tam, you don't collect. The half a payment which is a mu'id, that half you do collect. So therefore, he's saying that you only pay chatzi nezek, the half which is a mu'id. On the other hand, Rabbi Yehuda himself says you pay the full payment. Because Rabbi Yehuda says, even though it's a half a tam, but you do collect from an apotropis the whole entire payment, both the payment of the mu'id part and also the payment of the tam part. So that's the machlekes according to Abaye between Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, let's finish off the scene because it's one hemshech over here. The Gemara says, Amalei Ravacha bar Abaye le Ravina. Ravacha bar Abaye asks Ravina over here now on Rav's pshat. Bishloim la Abaye the Omar pligi. According to Abaye, that says that there's an argument over here about this basic point: whether you collect ever from an apotropis, do you collect the payment of a tam? So Shapir, so we can understand why we said that this brisa is talking about the case of a mu'id. Because if it wasn't talking about a case of a mu'id, Rabbi Yaakov would never say that you pay even half. If it was talking about a case of a tam, you would be totally potter. The only way to explain why Rabbi Yaakov says that you pay half is because it's talking about a mu'ed. So if it's talking about a mu'ed, so the half of tam you don't pay, the half which is a mu'ed you do pay. So that's understood why we had to say that this braise, the machlokes, is talking about a case of a mu'ed. But Elo, L'Rove, the Omar, Loi Pligi, Rove says there's no argument over here, which means everybody agrees that when you collect the payment from an apotropis, you even collect that payment of it being a tam. If so, the Moikila B'mued, why are you saying that the halacha of Rabbi Yaakov, that you collect Chatzi Nezek, is dafka in a case of a mu'ed? Noikve b'tam. You can say that the halacha of Rabbi Yaakov, that you pay Chatzi Nezek, is talking about a tam. And by a tam, you pay Chatzi Nezek. And the Gemara now explains that by a tam, you'll pay a Chatzi Nezek, and you could explain this in two ways. Now, you only pay for any damages if you didn't do a proper shmirah. But now, when you pay for a tam that you did not do proper shmirah, so there's two opinions what it means that you didn't do a proper shmirah by a tam. And the Gemara here brings the two opinions. If we're going to follow Rabbi Yehuda's opinion that we quoted before, so what did we learn before? Rabbi Yehuda holds that by a tam you have to do a very good shmirah, shmirah mu'ula. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, we could say that if you did a basic shmirah, which is not good enough, and he didn't do the best shmirah that's even against the ruach she'eina metzuya, so therefore by a tam he'll have to pay a chatzi nezek, and that was the halacha that Rabbi Yaakov was saying. That you pay chatzi nezek because it's talking about a tam that you have to pay for not doing the best shmirah possible. That's according to Rabbi Yehuda, or Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, or if we'll follow the opinion of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, so Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov holds that you don't have to do more than a basic shmirah even by a tam. So what's the case over here? He didn't do any shmirah at all for this tam, and therefore you'll have to pay. And the Gemara brings the source of this, the Tanya, as we learned in the Braise, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer, Echad tam, ve'echad mu'ed, the tam and the mu'ed have the same halacha, sheshamram shmirah pechusa, if the shmirah you did was just a basic shmirah, peturin, you'll be pater, it has the same halacha. So now the Gemara concludes its question. V'ha kamashmal on Rabbi Yaakov. When Rabbi Yaakov says this halacha that you pay chatzi nezek for a tam, by the shoyt of a cher, a shoyt of a cotton, what would be the chiddush of Rabbi Yaakov? We always know that a tam pays chatzi nezek. What would be the chiddush here? Rabbi Yaakov would be saying, the mamidin lahen apetropis letam ligbeis megufa. His chiddush is that even though there's an apetropis, and we brought before al machlekes, not everybody agrees that you pay b'chlal from an apetropis by a tam. So over here the chiddush would be that even though it's a tam, still you collect from the apetropis, and that would be the pshat on what Rabbi Yaakov is saying. So the question is, why, when Rava explained Rabbi Yaakov's opinion that you pay chatzi nezek, did Rava have to say that it's talking about a mu'ed, and by a mu'ed, the first half of the payment remains the payment of a tam, the second half of the payment is the payment of a mu'ed, and then he's explaining that the chatzi nezek is because you did a shmirah pechusa, so therefore you only have to pay for the tam and not for the mu'ed. A whole complicated explanation of Rabbi Yaakov's opinion. Why not just keep it simple? It's a tam, and the chiddush of Rabbi Yaakov is that you pay chatzi nezek for the payment of the tam. And it's telling you that even from an apotropis, you collect chatzi nezek. Simple. This is the pshat I brought up in the beginning, and the pshat Taisus discusses this over here. Taisus discusses why the Gemara in the beginning didn't want to say this pshat. Now the Gemara comes back to this pshat, but this is a very simple pshat for Rabbi Yaakov, what Rabbi Yaakov said. Amalei, so the Gemara answers that the Gemara explains why Rava said this pshat of a mu'ed, hachi ka'amar. This is the way Rava understood this. Chade de isbei tarti taime. Rava gave the pshat for Rabbi Yaakov's opinion, and he explained to Rabbi Yaakov that he's talking about the case of a mu'ed, and in that case of a mu'ed, you can learn 2 points of where Rabbi Yaakov agreed to Rabbi Yehuda. In other words, Rava saw this braise where Rabbi Yaakov is arguing with Rabbi Yehuda, and Rava wanted to say that even though Rabbi Yaakov is arguing with Rabbi Yehuda, but nevertheless, there were 2 points that he agrees to Rabbi Yehuda. He agrees to Rabbi Yehuda that even after it becomes a mu'ed, but the tzad of the tam still remains in its place, it doesn't change. And also, he agrees to Rabbi Yehuda that you only, for a tam, you have to have a shmirah mu'ula, and shmirah pechusa is not good enough. So Rava wanted to explain the machlekes of Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yehuda in such a eifin that there are 2 things that they agree on. The pshat that we're trying to say, that he's coming to tell you that from an apotropis you can collect the chatzi nezek even from an apotropis, that's taka true. But never, in addition to that, Rava wanted to show how in this braisa, where there's the machlokes of Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yehuda, they agree to each other in both of these points regarding the shmira of a tam, and also regarding the fact that even a mu'ed still remains a tam. That's one shot. Ravina says as follows: this second braisa that we brought the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yaakov, it's a different case. The Gemara before brought two braises. First, there was one braisa where Rabbi Yaakov said that you pay chatzi nezek. Then it brought a second braisa where Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yehuda argued whether you pay chatzi nezek or nezek shalem. Ravina says that second braisa, Rava wasn't speaking about that. That second braisa is talking about a different inyan. Rishos Mishane Ikebenayu. There, the argument whether you pay Chatzi Nezek or Nezek Shalem regarding this shoyt of the Chereshoyt of the cotton, and there was a apotropos appointed. It's talking about when the owner gained his awareness back, he became normal again. Going to have a mu'ed where the animal was a mu'ed. V'nispakech hacheresh or v'nishtafa hashayte v'higdla cotton. The cheresh became normal again. The shayte became normal again, or the cotton became a gadol, and that's where the argument whether you pay Chatzi nezek or nezek shalem. Rabbi Yehuda says that the animal remains in its previous status, and therefore you pay nezek shalem, because even though it changes ownership, it still is a mu'ed. Rabbi Yaakov holds rishus mishane. Once it changes ownership, it changes its status, it reverts back to being a tam, and therefore you pay Chatzi nezek. And that's so this price is talking about a completely different case, and that's the machlokes between them.